Alexander III of Macedon, popularly known as Alexander the Great, will always be remembered as one of the greatest rulers in human history. In his role as king of the ancient Greek kingdom of Macedon, Alexander established the largest empire that the ancient world had ever seen. While plenty of facts about this Macedonian king's life have been uncovered from ancient writings, artifacts, and architectural feats, one question remained unanswered for centuries: where exactly is Alexander the Great's final resting place? Thanks to the tireless work of a dedicated team of archaeologists, we may finally have uncovered the secret we've all been searching for. Archaeologists uncover astonishing revelation about Alexander the Great after centuries of digging. While many before them had tried and failed, archaeologist Liana Sivaltsi and historical author Dr. Andrew Michael Chugg believed that they may have finally uncovered the mystery of Alexander the Great's resting place. With Greek and Egyptian authorities blocking their investigations, the pair resorted to traveling to Libya and Italy respectively in the hope of uncovering answers. But in order to do so, they would have to win back the clock. To answer the pressing question, researchers had to delve down into ancient history, particularly around the time of Alexander's death. While the deaths of most historical icons were incredibly solemn events, Alexander's passing was kept under wraps, with the events surrounding his death remaining disputed to this day. One of the latest theories behind the Macedonian ruler's death was presented in 2019 by Dr. Catherine Hall of New Zealand's University of Otago. According to Hall, Alexander, who died in Babylon in 323 BC, suffered from an autoimmune disease called Guillain-Barré syndrome. While not a direct cause of death, this disease would contribute to Alexander's untimely demise. While still mentally fit, GBS struck Alexander the Great with abdominal pain and progressive paralysis. Chillingly, this may have led people to believe that the mighty ruler had passed before his time. According to Hall, the main reason why Alexander's body did not decompose in the days following his death may have been because he was entombed while still alive. There are, however, numerous experts who disagree with Hall's assessment. Just some possible causes of death that experts have listed include alcohol poisoning, assassination, malaria, and typhoid. Considering that this might be history's most famous case of pseudothanatos, false diagnosis of death, it was time to move on to the next pressing issue, learning about Alexander's burial. Astonishingly, the story of this great leader's burial poses more questions than answers. Having passed away at the tender age of 32, Alexander the Great was buried by his survivors in Memphis, Egypt, before his body was moved to Alexandria. But the journey of Alexander's corpse hadn't ended there. In Alexandria, Alexander's tomb became a place of worship before a series of earthquakes and rising sea levels buried it further underground. In 392 AD, Roman Emperor Theodosius banned pagan worship, during which time Alexander's body is believed to have vanished. Regardless, modern archaeologists still felt the duty to at least try to locate clues beneath Alexandria's sandy dunes. Archaeologist Kalliope Limnios Papacosta was scouring shallowlet gardens in Alexandria with her team in what were some of the final days of a 14-year project. After years of searching for traces of the great ruler without success, the team began packing up their gear when suddenly, a bit of soil shifted in the pit to reveal some white stone. Praying that it would be more than just a piece of white marble, Limnios Papacosta and her team had uncovered an early Hellenistic statue bearing the exact hallmark of Alexander the Great. Over the next 7 years, Papacosta and her team had dug 35 feet beneath the surface of Alexandria to uncover the ancient city's royal quarter. While earthquakes and rising sea levels may have impacted the ancient city, Papacosta did not lose hope. Armed with ancient accounts, a 19th-century map of Alexandria before its boom and modern technology, Papacosta and her team were able to identify 14 anomalies that could be attributed to structures deep underground. But this wasn't their only miraculous discovery. As Papacosta's team continued uncovering more of Alexandria's ancient royal quarter, their discoveries kept rolling in. These include a Roman road as well as a clearly important public building that may indicate the exact location of Alexander's tomb. Papacosta's team made history by becoming the first archaeologists to ever discover the true original foundations of the ancient city of Alexandria. Upon visiting the site, archaeologist Frederick Hebert admitted that it gave me goosebumps to see it. But even after achieving such a monumental feat, would the team achieve their original goal of locating Alexander the Great's final resting place? After 21 years of vigorous work in Alexandria, Papacosta is convinced that she is closer than ever to achieving her goal. While yet to locate the tomb of Alexander itself, she is convinced that it will be somewhere within the ancient royal city of Alexandria. Still, Dr. Andrew Michael Chugg and Liana Savoltsi are convinced they have come closer to finding the tomb than anyone before them, and for a good reason. To understand Savoltsi's claim, we have to travel back to 1984, when she applied for permission to excavate the oasis of Siwa. She believed that Alexander wished to be buried in the temple of the Egyptian god Amun-Ra. In 1989, she was granted the permission she needed to begin working on the site. Unknown to many, the oasis of Siwa was home to a plethora of historical treasures. During her excavation of the site, Savoltsi uncovered lion statues, a grand entranceway, and most notably, a 5,651 square foot Hellenistic royal tomb. But what was most jaw-dropping of all was what was written on the tomb itself. Unbelievably, the inscriptions referred to the transportation of a body, what seemed to be a huge stride in the hunt for Alexander the Great's remains. What's more, Savoltsi believed that these inscriptions were written by Ptolemy, Alexander's famous companion. There was only one thing left for Savoltsi to do: confirm her belief that this was indeed Alexander's final resting place. Unfortunately, as Savoltsi set out to confirm her beliefs, a political dispute interrupted her work. The Greek government called upon the Egyptian government to stop the excavation, as tensions between the two nations ran high. While Savoltsi may have hit a wall in her research, Dr. Andrew Michael Chugg was on his way to making some promising findings. In his book, The Lost Tomb of Alexander the Great, Chugg mentioned his belief that Alexander's original tomb near Memphis in Egypt was built by the pharaoh, Nectambo II. Because it is surrounded by sculptures of Greek poets and philosophers, it seemed like a suitable resting place for the feared ruler. What's more, Chugg developed an extensive theory on what exactly happened to Alexander's body following his burial. Chugg believes that in 392 AD, when most sources claim that Alexander's body disappeared, the famous ruler's corpse was stolen by Venetian merchants who mistook it for St. Mark's. While a seemingly wild theory, convincing evidence that supported Chugg's claim surfaced 16 years after his book's launch. In Venice, Italy, a piece of masonry that comprised the foundations of St. Mark's tomb was found. When examined more closely, it was found to have precisely matched the dimensions of Nectambo II's sarcophagus in the British Museum. While this evidence seems to support Chugg's belief, the question remains: what did the merchants do with the body after its discovery? According to Chugg, Alexander's body was smuggled back to Italy, where it was revered as St. Mark's in Venezia. While neither Chugg's nor Savoltsi's theories have been proven to be correct, we may be closer than ever to uncovering the remains of one of the most feared and revered leaders in all of human history. Ancient Greeks invented theater, the Olympics, and even the cornerstones of democracy. But really, Western culture just doesn't embrace the dirty details of Alexander II's time. Ancient Greece may have seemed pristine while we learned about it in school, but there was a grimy side that the books didn't cover. Toilet paper is only a recent luxury. As a replacement, the Greeks wiped with pebbles and smooth stones, which were difficult to come by. In a pinch, shattered pieces of pottery were used. Some even etched the pieces with their enemies' names. Totally worth the hemorrhoids. Gymnasium actually derives from a Greek word that meant school for naked exercise. Spotting someone on the bench press might have made for an awkward conversation. The ancient Greeks believed every bodily fluid had a specific taste. To diagnose illness, they'd take a sample of your phlegm, vomit, or excrement and have a sip. The question is, who would diagnose these poor doctors? Apparently, the Greeks never philosophized about safe feminine health practices. Instead, they viewed women as pure creatures with an aversion to the disgusting. To ward off disease, women were instructed to drink and be covered in the dung of cows and mules. Ever think you'd miss a pap smear? Women with illnesses weren't the only ones covered in excrement. If you needed a little pick-me-up, You could head down to the nearest farm and find some fresh dung to sink your face into. Oh, what we do for beauty. Women in ancient Greece were instructed to prevent pregnancy by rubbing oils on their private parts. When that didn't work, they were told to squat down and sneeze the pregnancy away. Unfortunately, this method only led to babies named Jasundit. Clean water is a commodity, and it was no different in ancient Greece. Public bathing was a common practice even among wealthy citizens. They'd stew themselves in strangers' fluids without even rinsing after. Not exactly the spot treatment. If alcohol can kill bacteria, why not the ammonia in urine? Some ancient Greeks would rinse with human urine on a daily basis. Apparently, they thought it could make their teeth less yellow. Go figure. We'll stick with Listerine. This process, called bloodletting, was said to release illnesses from the body. A doctor would make an incision and let the affected blood leak out slowly. For serious afflictions, they'd resort to leeches. Ironically, this led to further death. Thank the ancient Greeks next time you accidentally cut someone off in traffic. They gave meaning to the gesture, which was meant to be phallic back in 4th century BC. Suffering from aches and pains? Try athlete sweat. Athletes would oil themselves up, get covered in dirt, and let the gunk on their bodies be collected for sale. The rich would lather themselves up in this body mud and wait for the magic to kick in. Smooth skin was expected in ancient Greece, though there were no razors to purchase. Men and women would pluck hairs one by one until they were presentable. For a fast shave, they'd simply burn the hair from their bodies. Make a mistake, and you wouldn't be looking too hot. Love between two women was, and continues to be, somewhat of a mystery to many cultures. This included the ancient Greeks, who could only fathom that lesbians had female penises. Sex without a penis? Who could imagine that? To honor Dionysus, the god of wine, crowds of people would celebrate on the streets by waving around giant homemade phalluses. The jokes and obscenities they'd yell eventually morphed into large-scale productions, paving the way for early comedic theater. Poorer Greeks were limited to shirts and pants made of cheap materials, like wool. Not only were these garments itchy and hot, but were also a breeding ground for bugs and lice. Without washing machines, you could expect to live in filth every day of the week. These sticks were kept in buckets of water for reuse, even in public. This led to the phrase, grabbing the wrong end of the stick. Makes sense now, doesn't it? Just because you're a baby doesn't mean you get a free pass. In ancient Greece, some babies were tossed into buckets of wine to test their strength and durability. Think you'd have made the cut? Older men in ancient Greece took young boys as lovers, and a rooster was an indication of a man's affection. However, this affection would disappear once a young man grew facial hair. He was then expected to bring his own boy home to roost. Greeks feared an uprising of the dead. To stop selected bodies from coming back as revenants, Greeks chopped off their limbs and used heavy stones to keep them 6 feet under. In the ancient world, women were seen as the property of their father or husband, so rape was a violation of ownership, not of the woman herself. Not exactly the beacon of women's rights. To prevent sexual excitement, slaves were made to wear painful metal rings on their private parts. This horrific act is called infibulation and exists in many cultures for both men and women. For problematic slaves, complete mutilation was often on the table. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.